Hello. One of my most watched videos was actually the one, Can We Manifest Someone Coming Back from the Dead? If you haven't watched that yet, you will find the link below. But since this was one of my most popular videos, I decided to now make an entire series on manifesting people coming back from the dead. So we will talk about many different topics. Neville Goddard, of course, the wheel of recurrence, glitches in the matrix. My advice, if you want to manifest someone coming back from the dead, we will talk about manifesting a deceased pet to come back. One of the questions I received was, how can we connect to spirit? So there will be a video on that. And then I will give you several stories of people who actually did manifest not dying or dying and then coming back. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss that. First of all, I do believe it is possible, and doing this research made me sure even more. But you probably have heard about the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect said that many people, a collective of people, remembered Nelson Mandela dying in jail. However, that did not happen. He was released out of jail. I'm sorry, I'm German. I don't know the difference between jail or prison. I think it was prison. He was released and then even became the president. So why do many people have this memory of seeing the funeral on TV, and they all tell the same thing? They have vivid memory of the speech that was given, of what his wife wore. And I believe it has to do with different timelines. So a collective of people experienced a timeline where Nelson Mandela actually did die, and then the collective shifted into another reality where this did not happen, but they brought the old memory into this new timeline. We could also say that maybe a glitch in the matrix, but I do have more stories like this. I knew my uncle had died. My mom had called me and told me the news. It was very sad. She told me in the middle of work, and I told one of my co-workers. He expressed his condolences on my loss. A couple of weeks later, my sister mentioned my aunt and uncle doing something. I said, "But he's dead." And my sister said, "No, he wasn't." I called my mom. "No, he wasn't dead." To this day, I am still not sure how much of it my brain imagined and how much of it was real. Did I really talk to my co-worker? Was I even on the phone with my mom at all that day? It still freaks me out knowing that my mind could fabricate so complete and real a memory like that. And here's another one. I swear to God, my mom told me that my cousin passed from an OD a year before he actually did. So when she told me and I replied, "Yeah, from an OD, right?" she was shocked that I already knew. I thought she was somehow messing with me until she showed me his death date. I still can't really explain that one. And one more for this video. But again, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon because there will be more and longer ones to come. When I was 15, I was incredibly depressed and struggling with my OCD and anxiety. It got to the point that I decided to end myself. I arranged everything, a note, when, where, how, etc., and waited. I waited about a week until my parents went out to dinner. I attached a note to my door telling my parents not to come in and to just call the police. I got dressed in my nicest clothes, showered, did my hair, and put a suicide note in my shirt pocket. My father had a number of guns, and I chose one of them to do the deed with a Beretta 92 handgun or something like that. I went into my bedroom, turned on some music, and laid down on my bed. I put the barrel in my mouth, sang a few lines of Free Falling through tears, and pulled the trigger. Then I went into a third-person type thing where I was just watching myself. I saw myself lying dead on my bed, slumped over and bleeding everywhere. I watched myself lie in my own gore for what seemed like forever. Then suddenly it felt like all the wind got knocked out of me and I was back in my body. Click. The gun jammed. I just threw it on the ground and sobbed into my pillow for hours before cleaning up everything and going to sleep. I have no idea what happened that day, but I'm more grateful than you can imagine. After that, I really made an effort to turn my life around, and it did. It's scary thinking that I wouldn't be here right now if it worked. When I read those stories a while back, maybe like 2 years back, I don't exactly remember, the thought I had was, oh my God, what if reincarnation is not as we thought it was. For example, I was born in the 11th century, then in the 12th, then sometime in the 13th, again maybe in the 13th, and then the 14th, and so on. It's not a linear process. And even years back, when I really learned about time as an illusion, I thought, well, we could probably be incarnated at the same time. You know, like right now, 2023, when I record this, there may be several versions of me running around on this earth. But then, of course, I learned there is only one soul. So yes, of course, everyone is me pushed out. And we are all connected. But the realization, the download I had was, what if reincarnation is not what I used to think it was, but it was like living the same life over and over and over again? Like the story of that person who wanted to end themselves, and then they saw themselves from a third person perspective, and it was like a rewind and a do-over. And then I thought, what if that is reincarnation? If there's really different timelines, then our soul will experience all of them, and our conscious mind is only in one at a time. And to my clients, I always compare to the radio. You know, you can be tuned in the rock channel, but there are other channels broadcasted at the same time. Your radio, your receiver can only receive that one channel, the one that matches the frequency. You know, the channel has its frequency, and you have to tune in into the exact same frequency. But even if you listen to the rock channel, the rap channel, the pop channel, all of those, they still exist simultaneously and are available to you simultaneously. They don't cease existing just because you decided you want to listen to rock. And that's the same with our conscious mind. Our soul makes all the experiences, but our conscious mind is always tuned into one of those, you could say, infinite possibilities. And which one is the one you do actively receive? Well, it's a law of assumption, the one that matches your assumptions most. But the other realities still exist, and once you change your assumptions, you can shift. But I think that happens automatically when we die. We go back in time, and that might be, for example, with this situation, he didn't go back in time for years. He just went back in time a couple of minutes where that happened. But sometimes there may be bigger jump backs. As you will hear later in this video, an excerpt of one of Neville Goddard's lectures, he will talk about a 90-year-old man who now went back to 20. And he used that reference a lot, going back to when you're 20. I don't think it is necessarily going back to when you're 20, but I imagine it like different train tracks. You know, you go one path and there has been a very important decision right here. And then you take another route right here. And then maybe you go back even further and here has been another route, and you just live through all of the experiences. So sometimes you may jump back just a couple of seconds. Sometimes you may jump back a couple of weeks, months, years, whenever there was like a certain decision made that activated to make that specific experience. And your soul will play throughout all of these. And I believe reincarnation is just living the same life over and over and over again, but infinite possibilities that have all been created. So you could say basically we never die, because once we die, we just go back in time and we live the same thing, and there's just a tiny alteration. And there's just a multitude of tiny alterations. Some of them, of course, are bigger. You know, if again, like train tracks, this track may have like different path, but there may have been like a curve down there, and then there's different path as well, and you experience all of them. And I think the glitch in the matrix is that typically we don't remember that. We don't experience that shift consciously. However, since creation is finished, that was also meant for some people to experience it consciously, maybe to tell us or whatever the reason is. But if everything already happened, there can be no room for mistakes. So that some people experience this glitch cannot be a mistake. Some people experience the glitch in a different way. They experience, as we heard in the story of that uncle, they experienced that someone came back, someone they perceived that in their one timeline, and then somehow they shifted to another timeline where this did not happen. We can all the time shift through the timelines and over and over and over again, because it is not fixed. Again, it's like the train tracks, and when you make a new assumption, then it's like a new route opens, even though that always has been in existence, and we make that decision. But in a past life, you didn't go that way, you went straight ahead. But when we learn to consciously manifest, we learn to consciously shift through the different routes, the different timelines. We learn to choose. However, creation is finished. So there have been lifetimes where you didn't do that. Everything already has been created. I even have a comment from my channel where somebody also experienced someone being dead and then all of a sudden being alive again. So it is possible, absolutely. Well, there is way more to come just in this video and then in other videos. But please, if you already get some valuable content, like, subscribe, share it with others. We want to spread the message. Leave your comments. I'm so interested in what you have to say. And of course, don't forget to hit the bell icon, because I told you before, this will be an entire series. So there will be several more videos on this topic, manifesting someone back from the dead, to come in the near future. I think I will release one per week. If you already have subscribed to my channel, then you may have watched my reaction videos on the Philip K. Dick speech. I uploaded the entire video and then I recorded like 8 reaction videos because I was talking a lot and reacting a lot to his speech. And he also experienced shifting realities. For him, it was more that all of a sudden, like a download, a memory, a very vivid memory came back, and he also remembered dying in different timelines. And here's an excerpt of that video.
I can hardly make an error if there is no such thing as orthogonal time. Orthogonal or right-angle time is the topic of my speech. We are accustomed to supposing that all change takes place along the linear time axis, from past to present to future. The present is an accrual of the past and is different from it. The future will accrue from the present on and be different yet. That an orthogonal or right-angled time axis could exist, a lateral domain in which change takes place, processes occurring sideways in reality, so to speak, this is almost impossible to imagine. How would we perceive such lateral changes? What would we experience? What clues, if we are trying to test out this bizarre theory, should we be on the alert for? In other words, how can change take place outside of linear time at all, in any sense, to any degree? If you've followed my conjectures about the overlapping of these alternate worlds, and you sense as I do the possibility that if there are 3 or 4 or 2, there may be 30 or 3,000 of them, and that some of us live in this one, others of us in another one, others in others, and that events on one track cannot be perceived by persons not in that track, well, let me say what I want to say and be done with it. I think I once experienced a track in which the Savior returned, but I experienced it just briefly. I am not there now. I'm not sure I ever was. Certainly I may never be again. I grieve for that loss, but loss it is. Somehow I moved laterally, but then fell back, and then it was gone. A vanished mountain and a stream, the sound of bells, and all gone now for me, entirely gone. Although originally I presumed that the differences between these worlds was caused entirely by the subjectivity of the various human viewpoints, it did not take me long to open the question as to whether it might not be more than that in fact plural realities did exist superimposed onto one another like so many film transparencies. What I still do not grasp, however, is how one reality out of the many becomes actualized in contradistinction to the others. Perhaps none does, or perhaps, again, it hangs on an agreement in viewpoint by a sufficiency of people. More likely the matrix world, the one with the true core of being, is determined by the programmer. One very pronounced impression would probably occur to us, to many of us, again and again, and always without explanation. The acute, absolute sensation that we had done once before what we were just about to do now, that we, so to speak, lived in a particular moment or situation previously. But in what sense could it be called previously, since only the present, not the past, was evidently involved? We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off, became actualized instead of the prior one, and that in fact, in literal fact, we are once more living this particular segment of linear time. A breaching, a tinkering, a change had been made, but not in our present, had been made in our past. Evidently, such an alteration would have a peculiar effect on those persons involved. They would, so to speak, be moved back one square or several squares on the board game which constitutes our reality. Conceivably, this could happen any number of times, affecting any number of people, as alternative variables were reprogrammed. We would have to live out each reprogramming along the subsequent linear time axis, but to the programmer, whom we call God, to him the results of the programming would be apparent at once. We are within time, and he is not. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. This, too, might account for the sensation people get of having lived past lives. They may well have, but not in the past. Previous lives, rather, in the present, in perhaps an unending repeated and repeated present, like a great clock dial in which grand clock hands sweep out the same circumference forever, with all of us carried along unknowingly, yet dimly suspecting. In late February of 1974, I was given sodium pentothal for the extraction of impacted wisdom teeth. Later that day, back home again, but still deeply under the influence of the sodium pentothal, I had a short, acute flash of recovered memory. In one instant, I caught it all, but immediately rejected it. Rejected it, however, with the realization that what I had retrieved in the way of buried memories was authentic. Then, in mid-March, a month later, the total body of memories, intact and entire, began to return. You are free to believe me or to disbelieve, but please take my word on it that I am not joking. This is very serious, a matter of importance. I am sure that at the very least you will agree that for me even to claim this is in itself amazing. People claim to remember past lives. I claim to remember a different, very different present life. I know of no one who has ever made this claim before, but I rather suspect that my experience is not unique. What perhaps is unique is the fact that I am willing to talk about it. I also would like to tell you, if you have followed me this far, to accept my statement about my other memories under the sodium pentothal which returned. That world was a prison. It was dreadful. We overthrew it, just as we overthrew the Nixon tyranny, but it was far more cruel, incredibly so, and there was a great battle and loss of life. It was in February of 1974 that my blocked-off memories of Track A returned, and it was in February of 1974 that my novel, Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, was released finally after two years' delay. It was almost as if the release of the novel, which had been delayed so long, meant that in a certain sense it was all right for me to remember. That is, to remember that the book was not fiction. The book was based on subliminal memories which I had of such a world. But perhaps until the book was actually released, it was better that I did not remember. Why that would be, I do not know. But I have the impression that the memories were not to come to the surface until the material had been published very sincerely on the author's part as what he believed to be fiction. Perhaps had I known, I would have been too frightened to write the novel. As it was, I was very frightened anyway. There was something about the novel that frightened me a great deal. Or perhaps I would have just shot off my mouth and told everybody and somehow interfered with the effectiveness of that book and such other books of mine as Man in the High Castle, which were also based on residual memories. The effectiveness of those novels might have been impaired. There is, unfortunately, for me, a somber intimation which accompanies my pride in the work that I did in that alternate Earth. I think that in that previous world, I did not live past March of 1974.
I have also heard about Neville Goddard experiencing the same thing. He also talked about remembering dying over and over and over again. Unfortunately, I didn't find the source right now. I believe it was a video by Brian Scott that he was doing in collaboration with Mitch Horowitz. So you can check those out. Brian Scott has videos on Neville's death. Also, you can check out the Frank Carter lectures. And I am also going to do a video on that. Frank Carter was a friend of Neville and he was the last person to saw Neville. However, Neville Goddard called this the Wheel of Recurrence. He had the same download than I did. I had the download, as I told you before, and then I learned about several other people coming to the same conclusion, and Neville Goddard was one of them. And yeah, he called it the Wheel of Recurrence. By the way, there is one experience, I'm going to make a separate video on that will blow your mind, because one person actually saw that wheel, and that story is quite amazing, so make sure you don't miss it. Anyway, now I'm going to give you an excerpt of one of the Neville Goddard lectures. He also says that we're still the same person, you know, because there is just this minor alteration. It is not like a million timelines away. It is just when we come back, we don't jump into a completely different scenario. It is just this one tiny thing that is different in this experience, and then we experience the same life again with that tiny alteration that of course can produce a major different outcome.
Well, last Wednesday morning, on my return from my usual visits night after night as I'm teaching what I'm teaching you, but I'm not confined to this, for the world does not end where our senses cease to register it. When a man dies, as we call him die, he doesn't cease to be. He is solidly real, restored in a body just like this, only he is young. He is about 20. He drops off at 90. He finds himself 20, restored to life. But he hasn't changed one iota. His ideas that were present before he died are his ideas after, whatever they were. If he was stupid here, he's just as stupid there. If he was a thief here, he's a thief there. Whatever he is it there. Well, here on my way back on Wednesday morning, I encountered these two. Sir Archibald Cooke, who was the other gentleman, and the professor. They had not changed one bit. One is still interested in these things, and the other is not. One is still the scientist, and they don't even know that they have departed this section of time. They do not know, because no one dies. God is the God of the living, and nothing dies. Because it doesn't die, how can you tell a man, when you're looking at him and you're talking to him, don't you know I went to your funeral? He'll laugh at you. What funeral? Well, I went to your funeral. I saw them put you down into the little grave. And he starts to laugh at you as though you're insane. Because he knows he is not dead. But he doesn't know that he went through the so-called gate that we on this side of the veil call death.
I already said that going back to 20, I think it may be a metaphor or maybe he is talking about a specific situation that he has experienced. But I don't believe that 20 is like the setback point and we always go back to 20. I already told you it can be just a couple of seconds going back, or minutes, or maybe hours, or weeks, or maybe even years or decades. Yes, because we experience all of those lives. But let's end with another Neville Goddard quote, where he is again talking about going back and reliving the same life, just starting again in his example at 20.
For there is no death really, only restoration. Transformation in one sense. You move through the gate, don't even know you've gone. Got a call from New York today, 3 o'clock this afternoon. And there was a voice, a very sad voice. I said, hello, Neville, this is Louise. I have sad news for you. I said, what happened, my darling? He said, Joseph died today. He died in my arms. I said, was he sick? No, just a great, a rupture of the aorta. Right in my arms, and Neville's arms. Neville is my little namesake, one that I met before he came into this world. He's now 17, so together we held him. And he suffered seemingly for a little while, not too long, maybe a half an hour. He seemed to be in great pain, and then that was it. But he was 77, lived a full, wonderful life, and will leave her a considerable fortune. Factories here, factories in Paris, factories in Puerto Rico. And so, financially speaking, there is no problem, but a great tear. And what did I say to her? Couldn't even get her off the wire. But tell her certain stories that Joseph, he lived a full, wonderful life up to the very end. Up to the end. To him, the spirit world, let it come later, he said. Always let it come later. Tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow. But now, he was, after all, he was a couturier, making fashions for the beautiful ladies, and everything concerning the beauty of the physical form, and he loved it. And he played the field perfectly, even to the end, and he was 77. And so, Joseph will still be the Joseph that I knew. He will not be interested in the birth from above. He will not be interested in the Word of God. He made a fortune, and he's left a fortune, all to Louise and his one child, Neville. So they will have this enormous estate, and it really is enormous. But he is still the same Joseph. And when he finds himself, as he will now, not 77, but 20, and what a joy for him. He'll be 20, without any interest in spirituality, an interest in the human form. But they will come at the very end of the journey, as you're told in the 8th chapter of Amos.
Well, now, what do you say about that? I am so excited for your comments. Please drop a like, share, and I hope I see you in next week's video. And if I'm not going to change the order, I'm going to give you advice on, well, if you would like to manifest a person, a specific person, my advice to you if that is something you would like to do. And I see you in that video. In my last Can We Manifest Someone Coming Back from that video, or my other videos, or maybe in personal coaching. Until then, of course, I do wish you all the best now. Bye-bye.